started and trust that more people will be joining us as they are able. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Schultz, and I'm the Director of Interreligious Engagement here at CTS, and I am very honored to welcome you to our final Wednesday gathering of the year. What an achievement. We have made it this far. So we are very happy to welcome you all here for our final Wednesday gathering, where we are very honored to welcome Reverend Yvonne Delk, who was the first Black woman to be ordained in the United Church of Christ. And we're going to hear some wonderful words from her in just a bit. But before we do that, we will ask for Hazel Gomez, a student here at CTS in Bayonne, to join us with to lead us in with her words of gathering, which is a way that we center and bring ourselves into the space together that we have here. So Hazel, I would be very honored if you would take it from here. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. My name is Hazel Gomez. I am an MDiv student at CTS in Bayonne. And, when I was asked to introduce myself and to give some words of gathering, now that it's the last words of gathering, the last Wednesday gathering for the year, I had to say yes. One of the things that really sticks out to me, so as I am a Puerto Rican, a Mexican, and a Muslim, and I intentionally say that because there's oftentimes this belief that Muslims only come from one part of the world. And so for myself, as someone who was raised Catholic and became Muslim, there's just a lot of different life stances that I would like to share. So one of the things that really sticks out to me is this verse in the Quran where in chapter 49, where God says, one of the parts that God says, he says that you may get to know one another. In Arabic, it's called lita'arafu. And I think it's really, really telling for us to be here today in this spirit of lita'arafu. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Excuse me. In this verse in the Quran, lita'arafu, it's translated as that you may get to know one another, that you may know one another. And the beauty of these Wednesday gatherings is for us to be together and know one another. And as I mentioned, as being someone who's Puerto Rican and Mexican, with all the complex backgrounds that comes from, there is a particular Mayan poem that really grounds me and reminds me of this particular verse in the Quran. And I will read it. In Mayan, it's in Lakesh, and in Spanish, it is Tú eres mi otro yo. And in English, it's I am you and you are me. So if it's okay, I'll read it in Spanish very quickly, and then I'll read it in English. Tú eres mi otro yo. Si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí mismo. Y si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. You are my other me. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. This particular poem always reminds me of this phrasing in the Quran where God says, lita'arafu, that we may get to know one another. Because in the context of the verses, he made us into nations and peoples so that we may get to know one another. And so with that, we close out, I close out my words briefly so that we can go to the crux of our program. And as we end this year of 2024, have this reminder that we're here to get to know one another. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that was lovely, Hazel. Thank you so much for sharing that and for leading us in those very powerful words. And we are here to get to know each other. And thank you for allowing us to get to know you a bit and your different perspectives and intersections and parts of you that you share with us so generously. And we are grateful. We are grateful. I am grateful for that. And I am also grateful for Reverend Delk and all she is and has been and continues to be in this world. Reverend Delk is the former executive of the Community Renewal Society of Chicago. As I mentioned, she was the first Black woman to be ordained in the United Church of Christ, the UCC, and has served the denomination in leadership positions, including servicing as the director of its Office for Church and Society. For 60 years, she has served as an educator, preacher. I'm going to go back. For 60 years, she has served as an educator, preacher, organizer, and a prophetic voice leading the fight for human and civil rights for people of color, children, and the poor throughout 5 continents. No small feat. She's the founding director of the Center for African American Theological Studies, and her articles on the Black church experience, racism, and human rights have appeared in many publications. Today, she's going to reflect on the lessons that have been learned while living and being and leading and serving in difficult and dangerous times with what we're calling today, True to My God and True to My Native Land. Reverend Delk, we are so grateful for your time and what you can share with us here today from your experiences. And I will pass it to you and with my gratitude.
Well, thank you so very, very much for this opportunity to be here and to share a little bit of my faith journey and to also see some of the folk that I have connected with over the years that are on this webinar as well. I was just thinking, this has been an amazing year for me. This is my 85th year of life, and it is my 60th year of being a commissioned Christian educator, is what they did in the United Church of Christ. And initially, when I started my journey, I was in the field of education, and so I chose Christian education. So it was 60 years ago that I was commissioned as a Christian educator, and 50 years now since I become an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. And when I sit back and think about my life and my journey, I think about Maya Angelou when she said, I wouldn't take nothing for the journey. It's been an amazing journey that I have been on. And I've been just grateful each and every day that I have an opportunity to rise and to be able to live my life the way in which I understand that it is to be lived. Your invitation made me think about an invitation that I got from Chicago Theological Seminary almost 40 years ago. I was invited to be the commencement speaker. And one of the questions that I asked the graduates as they were preparing to leave the institution and to move into the world was, who or what defines who you are in ways that you feel you're not free to walk away from? Meaning, what is it that grounds you? What is it that anchors you? What is it that allows you in the midst of everything that you're going to be about to be foundational to your being? What is it that will shape your beliefs and what you see and how you move? Howard Thurman at one point says that there is a need for something in our lives that will not give. He says it's a strange freedom to be adrift in the world without a sense of an anchor anywhere. Always there's a need of mooring, that need for the firm grip on something that will not give. And that's something in my own life when I think about growing up in Norfolk, Virginia in 1939, my birth year, in the red light district of Norfolk, Virginia, which was considered one of the low-income areas of the city, and a city that was already segregated by race, and a city where many whites felt I had no rights, that they were bound to respect, and where I grew up with the signs all around me for coloreds only, where I had to get on the bus and pay my fare on one at the front of the bus, and then get off and to walk around to the back of the bus to get on it. When I think about all of the realities that deny life to you, and I think about having to wrestle with all of my life in some form or fashion with racism, having to wrestle for some form of my life with sexism, classism, homophobia, the systems that are designed to keep us oppressed and separate one from the other. when I think about the journey over these past 60 years, what is it that has allowed me to be anchored and to be centered and to feel that the journey that I have been on has still kept me moving in the direction that I felt I was called to move in? And I would say, again, I draw strength from the words of the anthem, the African American anthem that I started singing from the time I was a child in church straight up through my moments now as an elder in the village and a senior in the village, a mother really now in the village. And again, it reminded me over and over again, you got to have something that's anchoring you, that centers you. And the words were, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts are so drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may I forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. And for me, that's the grounding for me. That's been that which has allowed me to stay centered and focused and moving forward in the midst of all the powers and principalities that I have encountered in my life. And as I think about that, my faith, and when I think about my grounding in an African worldview, there are certain things that have had affirmations. We might call them lessons, but I'm thinking about them affirmations that I have, in fact, affirmed that has allowed me to stay centered as best I can. And the first affirmation that I have is that one's identity matters. I have known from the time that I was born that there was a call on my life. And actually, it began when I was yet in my mother's womb, when she prayed for me even before I left her and her womb that was protecting me as I was getting ready to make my entrance into the world. She, knowing all that I would face and all that would be in front of me, began in her words to me, in the songs that she was singing while I was yet in her womb, in the prayers that she was praying while I was yet in her womb. And because she had lost a daughter that had died early before me, a sister, Audrey Marie, that would have been born in 1937, and I came in 39. She died in 6 months of life. My mother really wanted desperately for me to live, desperately for me to live. And so she began in that early period to really talk to God and to talk to me, to talk to God and talk to me. It was a spirit kind of connection, so that by the time that I entered the world, I already felt that there had been a call on my life that I would live, and that I would live in a way that God would allow me to really be the person that God had, in fact, called me to be. When you know that there's a call on your life, when you know that there is a purpose for your life, and when you know in the midst of everything that you're moving through, that call is for you to, in fact, be true to a higher calling than yourself, that's to God, and to be true to a worldview, an African worldview. My mother was really an African woman. She lived within the context of the boundaries. She moved between the moments, I would say, of spirit world, where she communicated with the living and with the dead. And she flowed the boundaries in order that she could draw strength for the living of the days and the living of her days. And she passed that on not only to me, but from my sisters and brothers. So I grew up even in the midst of racism, even in the midst of sexism and all the negative reality, knowing that there was a call on my life. and that my identity would be about more than a job. It would be about more than a vocation. It would be about more than a position, but it was a calling on my life that I would live out no matter where I found myself, anchored in the Spirit, anchored in a sense that I had been created in the image of God, and also centered in an African worldview where all life matters, where you are interconnected with what is happening with you and around you, and a worldview that reminded me of the words spoken a few minutes ago by the sister who called us into existence, and that worldview was Ubuntu. I am because you are, and because you are, I can be also. My humanity is related to your humanity. There was a call on my life, and that call sustained me through the good times and through the bad times. That call on my life meant that no matter what I was facing, I was anchored in a understanding of who I was and the purpose for my life that would keep me moving forward. So first, I would say that one of the things that matters is one, having a call on your life, knowing that you are rooted in something that gives purpose and meaning to your existence, and finding a way with whatever gifts that God has given us to live that calling out. So one of the lessons was, when you've got a call on your life, it keeps you anchored and centered. No matter where the winds blow, however the realities move, that calling stays in your heart, your mind, your spirit, allowing you to press on. So one was the call on my life. Second, family matters. Family matters. And it matters to have family in the context of my DNA, my mother and my father and my siblings, the extended family of all those folk who wanted the very best for me and who prayed for me and who encouraged me along the way, to the families that I gathered to meet on the journey. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go by yourself. But if you want to go far, you got to go together. And so being able to connect to family, from the minute I remember when I walked the aisle of Macedonia United Church of Christ, at that time it was Macedonia Afro-Christian Church. However, when I walked the aisle and gave my hand to Reverend Hosea Scott, I was 10 years old, and gave my heart to Jesus Christ, I knew I was a part of a family now. And when they baptized me in the river, and out the river, I was that old, I went to the river to be baptized. When I came up out of the waters, I knew I was a part of a family now, a part of a movement now that was working for a world view that I would be a part of. I wasn't just by myself, and that family that I was connected to, the family that in fact was moving for justice and wholeness in the world, the family that was living out of a worldview, I would find them in the many different places where I would be able to move. I could do what I could do because I wasn't alone, but I was connected to a family who in fact embraced ideas that I embraced, a family who was working for the world that I envisioned that God was calling us to, a family where I could move, a family that did understand what it means to say, my humanity is related to your humanity. What happens to me relates to you. It is that Ubuntu spirit that was there. So just as my identity was so important to me, family was important to me, the communities in which I would enable myself to, in fact, be a part of. And I'm so grateful for so many communities that I have been a part of in my 80-some years of life. The third thing I would say is proximity matters. Where you choose to put yourself in the midst of the times in which we lose, where you choose to invest your energies and your sense of value and your sense of worth of being, who and how you make the choices for where you are going to be. When you decide that it is going to be critical that we find a way to live human in the face of death. You've got to find those places that you feel are the life-giving places that allow ones to live out one's humanity. And so the choices that I've made, the places that I say yes or no to, where I put myself and my mind and my spirit and the gifts that I feel that I have is so critical. So just as identity is important to me, just as family is important to me, proximity is important to me. And it's been wonderful to stand still and look at the various places where I've been able to stand and the people that I've been able to witness with and the ability in those places to make a difference in the narrative that was flowing in and around us. So identity has been important to me. Family has been important to me. Proximity has been important to me. And truth is important to me. At a time now that we are trying to face a nation that wants to erase a portion of the truth of its life as if it can, in fact, move forward on a false narrative, means that we still will be stuck or going back. It is only the ability to face the truth that will allow one to continue to move forward. And facing truth and being able to, in fact, witness to that truth, however the cost we have to pay for it, is critical. And so for me, learning how in the places where I have been to be able to be boldly to face the truth and then to speak the truth. It is also in that truth matters was important for me to also be able to receive truth spoken to me personally. And sometimes when you are engaged in the struggle, sometimes when you're trying to, in fact, do so much that you find yourself moving and struggling, and there's a point at which sometimes others need to be able to bear truth to you. And I'll just give you an example. I had found myself in a situation where, in fact, I felt myself, in fact, trying to hold the world up in many ways. I was trying to be superwoman in many ways. I was flying back and forward to Geneva, Switzerland. I was on the World Council of Churches. I was with, in fact, Community Renewal Society, doing work with it. I was engaged with my family in the midst of it. And I was moving at such a rapid pace that I wasn't taking good care of myself. And at a moment, my community, that family that I said, the community of folk who cared about me, sat me down in the midst of it and said, look, we can see, and by this time I had already had a mini stroke. They sat me down to be able to say, look, it's time for you to take some time out and take care of yourself. And so having a community of folk who care about you and who give you permission to take care of yourself. I was in a situation that needed me, yes. People needed me, yes. And I would have kept pressing on as best I could. But to have a faith community and to have a community of folk who understood that I needed time out and who could speak that truth to me in a way that I could hear it was critical to my ability to be able to keep moving on. So truth telling and truth facing is both looking at the systems and stuff that are around us, but it's also looking personally, internally at who we are and what it means for us to be able to, at some point, be given permission to say, it's all right to take some time out. It's all right for you to now take care of yourself. And I say, because they intervened in my life at that point in my life, and this was like in the 90s, I want you to know, in the 90s, that the years that I've had since then to continue to heal, to let myself grow and to take care of myself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually is the result of my now being in my 80s. They intervened in the 90s. And now here I am, like 20 some years later, still ready to be engaged in the struggle that we are in. And so I say truth facing and truth telling matters if we are to stay the course that we are a part of. The other thing is, for me, is the movement of the Spirit, the movement of the Spirit that allows us to keep moving. I live in an African context in this way. I receive life from those who have gone before me, and I am here now receiving life from those who are with me, and I pass that life on to those who are in fact coming after me. I live in a worldview that is not hierarchy, but is circular. It is circular. I draw strength from those who continue to be with me. And of course, the ancestors that we celebrate on a daily basis. I got Sojourner all over my house and my home, because I draw strength from Sojourner, who was still running around when she was in her 80s. And now that I'm in my 80s, and she was telling the truth and bearing the truth in her 80s, and I'm still doing that. So I got Miss Sojourner all around me, feeding my spirit, feeding my energy, allowing me to remember that I am still connected. It's a connecting consciousness. It's a sense of community that connects us one to the other. I challenge the whole notion of individualism, that we can do this work. It's about the ability to be in community and to draw that strength. And because I'm drawing strength from those who came before me, long before me, and they are inspiring me, I don't burn out as quickly, because I'm a part of a circle that is a movement of spirit, a movement of love and justice. And the spirit crosses line. You don't have to stay in a silo with that. I love the fact that I've been able to be in an interfaith context. I love the fact that I've been able to have my circle include persons from different perspectives and different ways of coming into that circle, still focus on justice and wholeness. But it is a diverse group of folk who feed each other and who inspire each other. And so to be able to be in that context that allows that circle to continue means that I know that we're going to be on this journey for quite some time. But while we're on the journey, we draw strength from each other. We draw strength from the varieties of folk. And we find a way to keep doing our best on our watch. And I'm hoping, that once I'm an ancestor, somebody else will say, as long as there's one who can call you by name, you will always be in the land of the living. And they will draw strength, and the movement continues. The powers and principalities are real, but the movement for justice is real. I think about the book that was written, There Is a River. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name of the author. There is a river. It should be right in my head. But anyway, who reminds us of the journey that we've been on, and that the river continues to flow. And as long as we are willing to take our place in the river and to be able to offer what we can in terms of changing the narrative, and it doesn't matter if in fact who is the power or the principality that is in existence. So the folks say to me, when they look at what's happening in our nation right now, when they look at what's in the globe right now, and would it have been a different representation than the one that I would have chosen for? Yes. However, whoever would have been in the power and principality position, the river still has to flow. We still have to find ourselves anchored and speaking the truth and working for the truth, because power and privilege has a way of, in fact, rooting you into a place where, in fact, it may become more about maintaining the status quo than it is about changing the reality of the system. So the rivers have to continue to flow. And so the movement for me, the being a part of a movement for me has been amazing in terms of knowing that it didn't begin with me and it won't end with me, but it will continue in the midst of it. But at least I've been able to place myself in the movement of history, in the movement of the Spirit, in order to keep the narrative of a world of wholeness, a world of justice, a world in which we can all, in fact, so how we see ourselves within the flow of time is so critical and important as well. And finally, I will say this, to find joy in the midst of it all. I really did enjoy hearing Kamala talk about joy, because in the midst of the journey that you are on, in the midst of all of the places, sometimes we can become so overwhelmed with all the realities that it seems that we have, that we find no joy. They suck, the powers and principalities can suck the joy out of your life. However, I refuse, because first of all, my life didn't come from them. My life came from a divine spirit that continues to give me spirit each and every day. So to find the places of joy, I love being able to go and listen to jazz somewhere. I love listening to some of the arts. I go, the theater still reminds me. And I even, let me say this, one of my favorite things to do in Chicago while I was there with Community Renewal Society was to go every Christmas to hear the Christmas Carol. I love the Christmas Carol. And I love going and hearing the challenge again. And the challenge was about that question that I raised. Who or what defines who you are? And ways that you're not free to walk away. Who determines how one lives one life and what it means to live one life, and whether you end up alone or whether you are moving in the context of spirit and community in the midst of it. So I've said this, it's been for me an amazing journey, and I am just so grateful to God that I have been a part of the journey that I have been on. And it has been my faith. And it has been my connectedness to an African understanding of a holistic worldview that flows circular in our understanding of who we are, our connection to each other, to be able to see ourselves in terms of our humanity being related to each other, that has in fact enabled me to have a center and a core that has kept me going. So when I stop and take a look at the reality, who or what defines who we are, and ways that we are not free to walk away from, I say, one, it's been my identity, a call on my life, and it's been a call on my life, and that call remains no matter where I am or who. It's not about being Dr. Yvonne or Reverend Yvonne. As a matter of fact, today I am mother. And it's amazing that I'm mother, since some folk will say, well, you never got married, you never had any children from your loins. I say, yeah, but my spirit, has in fact impacted so many. I have many daughters and sons in many different places, and their spirits I feel in a mighty way. A mother, it's a relation world. It's a world of being in relationship to others. And in that sense, I still continue to be in the birthing process at 80. Hello, at 80, birthing process. And I still am grateful that I can place my life in those places which give life. Don't put yourself in places where you're not safe. Don't put yourself in places where, in fact, you cannot be the best that you can be. I love the clearing. I love when I'm think about Toni Morrison's creating that image of the clearing, where we can love ourselves and we can love each other, where we can be human with each other, where we can cry and celebrate and work together and find a way to move together. I choose. Life is a gift from God, but what I do with my life is my choice in terms of giving back. And I choose a life that will be in the movement of the Spirit for the beloved community that hopefully we can continue to move and work for. So thank you for asking me to be a part of this. Thank you for allowing me to share just brief little nuggets from my own life that has had meaning. And I am open for dialogue or discussion in relationship to that.
Reverend Delk, thank you so much for those very moving and for me, very profound words that you've shared, lessons from your journey, which are very impactful right now on the journey that that a lot of us are on. So we are grateful. I mean, the river must flow, and it will flow regardless. And the irony of the both you and Hazel, starting with the interconnectedness of our humanity in these times, and the importance and power of that, it was really beautiful. I would love to open it up for thoughts, questions, reflections from the group, takeaways that you might have, things that are sticking with you as well.
Dr. Delk, this is Howard Wiley.
Yes,
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
The first thing I want to thank you for your wisdom and for your words of inspiration. And I also want to thank you for the life-giving and transformative presence that you have been in my life.
Mm.
And the leadership that you gave to the Center for African American Theological Studies when I was on the faculty there. And I just wanted to thank you so much for what you have given me. And on a side note, I think the author that you're referring to in terms of There's a River is Vincent Harding.
Exactly, Vincent. I know. I said I should have his name written in my heart. So it is in my heart, but I couldn't remember it at that moment. Yes, Vincent Harding. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yes. Also, I want to say thank you too. That was another wonderful moment in my life. That's why I said there are many communities that I've been a part of and many places where we connect with each other across various lines and different spaces and places to be a part of helping a narrative to continue to flow. And I think of all of the students that were a part of the African American Theological Studies program, the CATS program, those who came, those who got inspired by our witness, the fact that we had you as one of our professors that was there in that program, and the fact that we were able to bring students who had not necessarily at that point had a seminary degree, but they were already in ministry. They were already practicing and they were already engaged, but they wanted to go deeper and they wanted to, in fact, equip themselves within a perspective. And at that point, there wasn't an African-American seminary in the Chicago area. And one, of course, the person who at Jeremiah Wright at Trinity Church, who had in fact been a professor with so many seminarians who walked out every day, came up under him. He was teaching them. They wanted more of that perspective. And so looking around, trying to create a moment where we could, in fact, have an African perspective at the core of our seminary courses and what we were teaching was so important. But it was more than that. It was a relationship. When I think about the students who came, it didn't feel as if there was a divide between the professor being the great person who was pouring knowledge in their hearts, minds, and soul, which you were. But it was about an ability to be able to figure out how we walk together on this road, and the gifts that we had, the insights we had that could, in fact, and so we were drawing strength from the students, just as they were drawing strength from those of us who were the faculty within that context, and to be able to walk that road together was an amazing period. So I'm grateful to God for that period. I'm still hearing from many of those who were in fact being inspired by that, and now they are out inspiring many, many others. And so I smiled when I saw your face and your name. So wonderful to see you again.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you too.
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Braxton, President Braxton, I see your hand raised, please.
You so much, Kim. I want to continue just where our sibling Howard left us, Dr. Delk, by saying what I often say at CTS, that the two sweetest words in the English language, when they are sincerely uttered, are the words, thank you. And on behalf of the entire CTS community, and more specifically on behalf of my own family, I want to say thank you for who you are in not only the national, but the global village. And I want to go on record in front of this community, since you talked about truth, and tell the truth, that you have done for me what you have done for so many others. That is, come alongside us, those of us who are trying to lead, especially in moments when the flame was very low on the altar in my soul. And you know some of those moments. I am literally thinking about a lunch that you and I shared in a Chicago restaurant when I didn't know which way was up.
Yeah.
And you helped to restore my confidence and build me up and enrich my life and the life of my family. So I just want to say on behalf of this community that reveres and loves you so much, thank you. And what an honor to have you with us today. And then I want you just to muse a little bit more for our benefit on this marvelous notion of proximity. Oh my goodness, you were stirring up something in me when you talked about proximity. And I'm curious to hear you muse on this creative tension that I have sometimes felt. Sometimes there are places, as you have so rightly said, where we choose to invest our energy. Other times I have felt that I've almost been deployed to places, whether or not I had much choice in the matter. So I'm curious to know how you have navigated that tension of proximity, of volition and choice, and maybe providentially being nudged or compelled to certain places because your gifts may have been needed there in some kind of way.
That's amazing reflection. I think about it, and I said we ought not put ourselves in places that are not safe, and sometimes it's precisely in the places of injustices that are not safe that we have to go and be that reality that fights and struggles for justice and wholeness in the midst of it, and choosing where we go and how we stand in those places are just so critical. And because I've been in both, I've been in places where I have felt like when I talk about the African American Theological Studies program, I planted my body, my spirit in the midst of that. And it was an amazing moment with persons that I was walking the road with, that I felt that they were in proximity to what I was standing for and what I, in fact, wanted to be about. But then I think about places that I was encouraged to go into, that I had to be led into those places. And I said to once, somebody was asking me about a calling on my life. And I remember I said this, I said, God's yes for my life was stronger than my no. There were places where I said, I will not go. I will not go. And yet the call and the spirit from God said, but you must be there. I said, I will not go because they don't respect women. I will not go because they don't respect me as an African American. I will not go because I know how they feel, in fact, about persons who are transgender and gay and lesbian and bisexual. I know how folk feel about that. And I don't feel I want to place my spirit in those places where they stand against who I am. And for some reason, God sent my spirit directly up into those places where I would have to stand and witness in a strong way. It was the Spirit of God moving me into those places to say, but you are needed and your word is needed. And while I have boldly stood here and said, I will not, in fact, place my life in harm's way, and I will not go into places that will say, I have on my journey have had to hear another voice that was calling me, in fact, to be in those places. And when I have been in those places, I will tell you this, that God has prepared for me others who were already in those places standing. So it wasn't just me singing, how do I sing the Lord's song in a strange and alien land? It was, in fact, God had others there who was also trying to sing God's song in those places. But I had to choose. When I felt I had the spirit and the courage and what I needed to be able to be in those places, and when I needed to, in fact, withdraw. And I think I was thinking at the moment that I found myself when my folk, which I would say my village, had the truth-telling moment for me when I was telling you, I'm grateful when you tell me that I've been there for you at moments when you hit a low point and when you're trying to struggle. Because no matter where you position yourself within the worldview that we are part of, wherever you position, you find yourself dealing in some way with powers and principalities. Even when I think about the fact that I had to struggle within my own church that nurtured me with everything in their spirit, I still had to fight as a woman to be able to get into the pulpit. And when I think about my own church, that was a safe place for me. It wasn't safe for those who were gay or trans or any of that. And so I had to fight within that to open up that space for them. But I did have to choose at moments, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, when in fact I had to allow others to be in that place where they could stand within the context of the powers and principalities. And the moment that I realized that, in fact, I needed to withdraw and let myself heal, because there are wounds in all of it. Whenever you stand in the midst of the realities that we are standing in, when you try to witness with your whole body, mind, soul, and spirit, you still are like a wounded healer in the midst of those. You take into yourself and your body and your mind and your spirit some of that which is the woundedness of it as well. And there's a moment at which you have to withdraw and let others who will be willing to do it. But I say this, God has called us to be willing to go directly into places where the struggle is in fact an everyday reality of in fact helping a new narrative to evolve. And so at this stage of my life, however, I will say this as an elder. Now, when I was younger, I was more ready to say, yes, God, send me over there where the powers and principalities. Yes, God, let me be your spokesperson and a warrior for justice over there. But at this point, I'm ready to say, I will encourage, I will be a mentor, I will inspire, I will even tell my stories, I will do all that I can to let them know they are on a continuum of persons that continue and support those persons who have made a choice to be in the wilderness, as I call it, to be on a mission in the midst of the wilderness. However, for me, at this point in my life, for the rest that God gives me, it is to be in those places where I can be a mother, where I can mentor. I'm not a warrior now, but I have a warrior's heart and spirit that I am encouraging and centered. But for me, at this age of 85, it is to position myself as mother, as mentor, as inspirer, as a keeper of the story, as a supporter for those who will be continuously on the journey. So I choose now to be in the clearing, if you will, and to be in that place where I can exist as well as I can. However, that does not say that I'm not willing to speak truth to power. I do. It's not say that I'm not willing to witness as loudly as I can. I do. But there is a call, Brad, that would be me saying, God, I want to be safe. And God saying, but that's not the place where I'm sending you today. So, and I have said on my journey, sometimes God's yes for where I needed to be was much louder than the no that I said to God.
You just set my and our hearts on fire. And I'm going to say, as we say in the tradition, I'm going to run on, see what the end going to be. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Thank you for that. I feels like that is a strong and beautiful place to end. If there are other questions, we can entertain another question here before we do so. If there are any, yes, Deneen, my heart as well. And if there are any other thoughts or reflections or questions we want to offer before we go, I'm going to say this because I'm also going to give President Braxton a head start, because I might ask him for some closing words on the spot as we close out this beautiful session with Reverend Dr. Delk, and with as our final session of the year, as well as our final Wednesday gathering of the year. But before I pass it back to President Braxton, is there any other comments or questions that need to be shared into the space right now?
And just in case I haven't said it loud enough, I also want to echo something that President Brad just said, and that is to say thank you myself. I'm grateful to so many. I'm grateful to a mother who, while she was carrying me in her womb, understood that God had a call on my life and began to minister to me while I was yet in her womb. The passenger said, I have known you since you were yet in your mother's womb. And my mother, reeling from the loss of another child, but living in the hope of new life, began to nurture me for new life. I'm grateful to her. I'm grateful to my father, who did whatever he had to do. Daddy dug graves for a living. And for a while, as a little girl, I was embarrassed that he dug graves, because I wanted his name to be like the lawyers and the doctors and all the others that were around. But he gave himself to providing for us as a family and did what he had to do. So I apologized to him over and over again once I couldn't finish apologizing as I came to myself about how important he was and continues to be in my own vocation, but the journey that I have been on. I'm so grateful for all the folk who saw something in me before I ever saw it in myself, and began to empower me and nurture me. And I'm grateful for the journey that I've been on for these 85 years with you who are at this meeting and with so many others. And I want you all to know that in the context of the world in which we live, that connection of spirit and love and hope and witness for justice creates a proximity and a river that will continue to move long after we are no longer here. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of that. So thank you, Kim, for even calling me and saying, would you just have a moment with us on this gathering? I'm grateful. I'm very grateful.
We are so grateful for you. I am going to pass to President Braxton, but I do see Nolan, you have a hand raised. So if you want to give us a final thought before we do that, Nolan.
I just want to thank Dr. Delk for her presence. I just want to share just one experience. When I was first putting together my community development organization, I was told that I had to speak to Dr. Delk. And I want to acknowledge that Dr. Delk had then, and I'm sure now, an open door policy that she readily accepted me and she freely gave me, her advice and shared her wisdom with me. So that represents the seeds, Dr. Delk, that you have poured into me. So it may be that that experience happened so long ago, back in the 90s, that we have lost contact, but you don't know how you have influenced me. And I'm sure others can also attest to they have been enriched just because their paths have crossed yours. So I want to thank you from the depths of my heart for how you have poured into me from a distance. Thank you.
It's beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. What a beautiful last thought. And I just want to also thank you, Reverend Delk, for I've been personally very moved by this, and I'm just really grateful for your presence here today. President Braxton.
You, Kim. Did you hear it? Were you listening with your third ear? Let me ask again. Did you hear it? Were we listening with our third ear? Because if we were, we heard today, as this mother, as this village elder talked with us, we heard what it sounds like when you encounter fierce love, fierce faith, fierce gratitude, fierce courage, fierce imagination. Did you hear it? Were we listening? Where there is no music, the Spirit will not come. Whenever I'm in the presence of Dr. Delk, here's what comes to my spirit. Done open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Blessings.
Thank you. Have a wonderful holiday, everybody, and a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Reverend Delk.
Thank you.